we are a family of 6, of course, including my parents. My father was a government employee, moved different cities, gave me therefore a flavor of diversity at a very young age, to treat everybody equally. And the 4 of us siblings, I was the youngest, always been the boisterous one amongst the 4 of us, was a lot into sports. And the beauty of growing up in a place like Chennai is it's an eclectic mix of, a standard South Indian Tambram family that I come from. You are seeded in our culture, standard things like going to the temple, learning dance, learning classical music, Carnatic music, to waking up to Carnatic music and sounds of puja, to being deeply rooted in academic excellence. It was a very different childhood where this had also been coexisting with the other side of me, which was I used to travel extensively for sports. I used to be a hockey player, and I can't think now with what we hear about women's crime and all that. And those days there was no phone, and therefore, how the hell did my parents send me when I was just in 6th grade all to Delhi for 10 days with no connectivity, just hoping the daughter will come back safe? So they played a big role in shaping who I am, keeping in my mind my roots, as well as keeping the fact that they didn't differentiate between male and female. They didn't think that she's a girl from a conservative background, she shouldn't be traveling, going to some unknown place, she should be focusing on. They gave me all the freedom to do what I want. My childhood, that was the biggest lesson, saying you should just let your girls be girls. And they treated, I'm not saying just girls, even boys. My brothers had equal opportunity to do what they want. They never said you should be a doctor, you should be an engineer or whatever. And I think I grew up to be brave enough to explore a lot of things. I went to college to do zoology. I was academically very, very good, although my parents never pressured me. I was academically very good. I continued to keep my passion in hockey. I continued to take a lot of leadership roles within school, within college. And at one point in time, I decided I wanted to do HR. And it was okay. It was not like, I took that, it was just serendipity. Let me tell you that, Smita. It was never planned. I suddenly realized, coming from a very middle-class family, that, you need to get a job after you finish school. And therefore, it just one thing led to another. And honestly, HR happened by accident. Once I got into to masters, I put my heart and soul there again. Again, given that I had a well-rounded experience of taking leadership roles, being, happy to do things out of my comfort zone, I think that really helped me land my first job just as I finished my post-graduation in Visteon, which is a multinational company, Ford Motor Company. And then, obviously one led to the other, and here I am in Google. It has been a dream run, but I think these seeds of dreaming big were really sown by my parents. That's really where I will say it all began. All awards to me are like an outcome, right? I think what's important is the journey that you take. And these are endorsements, these are validation for the work that you do. So we at Pega, and I'm very proud of, and again, I would not say it was my accomplishment alone. It was a dream of the entire leadership team, I remember our SVP from the US, he had come down as I was just hired. And Pega was already a very good brand. If you go to Hyderabad, they'll say Pega is a dream company to work for. Very, very seated, and a lot of good work was already done. So I wouldn't take credit entirely for myself. But I remember this one conversation that he had. And he said, if we have to keep a brand recall value, right? Like for instance, if you say Tata, the first thing that comes to your mind is ethics, or being rooted in ethics. So he said, think of what is it that you want Pega to be known as. And he nudged saying, we should be the best place to work for women, Shanthi. And this was back in 2016, yes, when I joined. And that kind of set off the dream to say, hey, we should do something that really stands out. And I think, like I said, it was never to win awards. It was truly a belief to say, what should we be looking at? Therefore, we did a lot of work that I would say very intentional work that we did with a plan, segmenting our approach in different ways before we could get there. And I think the multiple awards that we have received is really a testimonial to the intent that the leadership had to truly do what's best for our women at Pega. I think giving people that feeling of being equal, or being that they will always have an equal space in the organization, is what I think leads to this. To me, that's what is the secret sauce. Just make everybody feel equally valued. That's important. And there is a saying which says, equality and equity is also very different, right? So, I think if you keep that at the front and center of everything that you do, I think that's the secret sauce. There are 2 E's and one I that I would say. The 2 E's, first is executive sponsorship. Nothing happens without leadership commitment. The second E is education, which means you have to go out and educate everybody. It's women, men, anybody that's there in an organization have to truly believe why diversity and inclusion is important. The third is the I that I talked about, is the intent. So once you've got the executive sponsorship, once you have got educated people, you have to truly be intentional about anything that you do. That's a great question. And I always believe that diversity, and I tell my country head CEO that diversity is not a nice to have. It is a imperative now, business imperative. You'll have everybody from Google to Pega to Salesforce to ServiceNow, everybody talking of diversity, right? I think the key sauce for you to convince them is, look, your customers are not the same. Your customers are diverse. You don't choose your customers saying, oh, I will only work with these people because these are the people that I like, or these are the people that look like me, right? You are willing to work with anybody just because that's going to give you a commercial benefit, a business benefit. So why wouldn't you have a same mirror? After all, organizations are a mirror of the society. Why wouldn't you have the same thing? Because look at it from a product standpoint. When we create something for somebody who is, I don't want to use a word normal, somebody like you and me, we can interact like this over Zoom, right? And if Zoom were to think that's all the market that I want to capture, that's great. They will hire people like Smita and Shanthi and get the work done because we know exactly what's needed. But if you were to cater to a diverse population out there, there might be people who can't hear. Is there something that you can customize your application? How would a Smita or a Shanti be able to even relate to that? You need people who can understand that, right? So I think it is as important as that to tell people that you need to be able to bring people with different perspectives that's reflective of what's there out in the society to really have a winning edge. To me, therefore, this is a no-brainer. It is a business imperative. It is not a good to have at all. So that's how I look at it, and to be fair, I think we have come a long way from a decade ago where people didn't understand this to it. I wouldn't say there are not cynicism. That's where the education piece is so critical. But I think people get it more than before, Smita. Major roadblocks in my head is the single most is that these things don't give results immediately, right? It is something that takes years sometimes to show what is the benefit. So in organizations that run quarter to quarter and look at financial results, business imperatives on a quarter to quarter, you need to have patience. And this is something that will benefit you in the longer term. I say when I say longer term, over a year, over 2 years, it will benefit you in one or the other. So biggest obstacle is something like a diversity and inclusion. If somebody is looking for tangible ROI, you might not get it immediately, right? So I have seen that mindset in many of them saying, oh, why should I do this? What is it going to give me? Etc. etc. I think that's not how you look at this at all. If I were to say that I have to hire 1,000 people, and if I were to say that I will only look at one gender and leave out the others, then imagine you're automatically reducing your talent pool by half. I believe that the biggest obstacle even today is a lot of people understanding, why should I commit to this journey? That's really the biggest obstacle. It is definitely not a HR-driven agenda. If you call it as an HR-driven agenda, be sure it's going to fail, right? It can never be a people agenda. However, and today chief diversity officers in organizations are not uncommon to see, who may be within the HR fold or directly report to the CEO, right? For instance, within Google, it is within the people function. Within Salesforce, it is not within the people function. In EDS back then, many decades ago, it was a separate function reporting into the CEO. Yes, it is important that you have somebody that's there who is committed to helping facilitate. Just like you have somebody for finance, somebody for HR, you have somebody who's responsible for it. Just like HR doesn't do everything. We ultimately say managers have to deliver compensation, managers have to deliver performance. It's the same thing. Diversity, you do have somebody who makes the programs, makes the plan, is an expert, is an SME to say, how do you do things? Ultimately, you will have to get the business to own. The second thing that you asked was task force. It has to be entirely voluntary within a structure that the chief diversity officer's office puts together. They could decide on what are the various employee resource groups, which are very, very, very common these days. You could have an LGBTQ ERG, you could have Blacks, you could have Hispanics, you could have gender, so many ERG, employee resource groups. Those are always voluntary. Like-minded people come together because the same reason that I said before, they know what they need and therefore are able to be an advocate for it. And typically, all of these ERGs have executive sponsorship at the highest level. So the CEO's directs could be the executive sponsor for each of these ERG. So they get the right level of commitment, right level of support, budgets or whatever. But largely I have seen anything that's ground up really works beautifully with, of course, a structured facilitation and programs and budgets. I think the first thing is your policies. At Pega, we did this beautifully. Our policies were never one size fits all. I think that was one of our other secret sauce. When we looked at women, we actually segmented by their life stages, right? So when you're younger, when you're straight out of college, you want to spend more time on education. You want to see what else can you do. Can I do an executive MBA? Can I do this? Can I do training? Blah, 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 blah. When you get into that critical family situation, you're looking at children, you're looking at marriage, you want more leave, you want daycare, you want support, you want carers leave, you want all of that to be able to sustain. When you go into your senior positions, again, you go back into the loop of learning, leading with empathy. How do I lead a diverse group of people? How do I be confident? How can I negotiate? Some of those things that women generally are not good at. So at Pega, really our policies were, and many organizations should consider, it cannot be one size fits all. If you think these are women, so all of them would like daycare, I have grown-up children. I don't care if the company is giving me daycare or not, because I really don't care. I don't have a need for it. Somebody who has a young child would want all of that. So the first thing that you should look at structurally is look at the policies that you have and the support system that you have. I remember at Pega, there was a superstar woman employee who was, wanting to leave, although she really hated leaving because she had a child and she didn't have any support at home. And therefore spoke to her and said, you want to take an extended leave, feel free to take, work flexible hours whenever you're able to log in. You want to work, move to your, mother's house. Her mother was in Kerala and an office was in Bangalore. We said, you want to move there, so somebody is there to support you. She started working part-time, full-time, whenever she was comfortable, and we could save a superstar. And I can very proudly say she was sure, she was so committed that in the next year she grew on to take 2 more teams under her fold while she was still managing a young child. So I think that's what organizations should do, to intervene in every single case of these, because these are unique. Everybody's life is unique. So you really need to be intent. That's why I keep using this word intentional. It is about being intentional about whatever you do, and treat every individual as individual, because their situations are very different. And then you can really be successful. I think this is a beautiful, that is true. It's not scalable at large organizations. And I think it can still be done if you have a very structured way of logging requests that come in, right? As you're growing, start putting in. Like at Google, we have some, we log every such request, or for that matter, any issues that come up. Those are very, very methodically logged. Sometimes you start seeing method to madness, right? You would see that 80% of the cases are similar to that. When as an HR team, you sit down along with the executive leadership, you might find saying that maybe it is because your policies don't allow certain things, and therefore you're wanting to take, an approach that is reactive. I believe strongly if you have a very formal approach to some of these programs and start logging in them and bucketizing them, you would evolve over the next 3 months or 6 months when you're sitting down to say, hey, let's look at what are those cases that we did, and say, hey, in the example that I gave, you should just say, hey, anybody. And I'm not a big fan of making anything just for women policy. So whatever, like for instance, in Pega, we had daycare policy and it was applicable to everybody, right? Men, women, everybody. It's not right to assume that only women are take care of children. Maybe men need that too, right? So who are we to judge? If you're able to log that very structurally, you would find there are common themes that you can address through iterative policies. And that's what my advice would be. So diversity, cannot any longer be something that's a very loosely nice to do. We just do programs, call people to talk to people, inspire. Yes, those are all important, but there has to be structural programs, just like, you run your sales organization, just like you run your, analytics organization or a HR operations organization. D&I should be looked at that way. Every leader, men or women, want to do the right thing. So nobody gets up from the bed and say at that day and goes into the office saying, today I'm going to discriminate against a woman, right? Just taking an example. Or I'm going to discriminate against a man. Everybody has good intentions. You start with the thinking that it's good intentions, but sometimes you just don't know how some of the things that you do are counterproductive. In the organizations, there are these days, in Pega as well, we used to look at gender pay parity. We used to look at performance rating parity, just to see whether there are unconscious biases that come in the way. And it's fascinating to see when the first time we went and said, hey, why are women having, lesser percentage of women at the top ratings? Everybody jumped out of their seat and said, hey, no, we don't do this, maybe that, right? The initial reaction is, we give the best people the best rating, so this is what they deserve, or whatever. As you start peeling the onions, you start looking at maybe the person was on maternity. Maybe the person was on extended leave, and therefore your normal expectation is, hey, out of the 6 months, they were there only for 4 months. Nothing against the person, but I would not give an exceeds because they were just there for 2 months, right? So I think those come in the way, and therefore we have to knock the managers again and say, hey, you have to therefore evaluate only for the 2 months. Don't look at 6 months and tell me whether they did well in those 2 months. Same thing for promotions. I think you need to look at, and the fact is, Smita, somewhere down the line, women do fall by the wayside, don't become promotable because they get pulled into so many other distractions of family and the others. Therefore, I do have a little empathy for them, that we have to give positive reinforcement. And sometimes we just need to call that out in front of leaders when they say that I do the right thing, I don't discriminate. Sometimes we do need to look at case, we need to put data out there and ask them. One of the things, I'll just give one more example where we used to look at women who have been in a role for a longer period of time. We used to do that for men as well, but more for women, and people who had consistently high ratings and not promoted. So we used to do a lot of analysis around some of these data. And then when you go and present it, people automatically wake up and say, should we be doing this? Then they're more than happy. So I think the role of whoever is running diversity is to look at data, look at seeing how can they positively improve the input. So the output is how you desire, right? But nobody says that I will today, at least where I work, we never say we will keep these positions for women to fill, because that's being disrespectful even to the woman. It will be almost like she came through a quota. We never do that. What we instead do is focus on the pipeline, which means if there are 10 CVs, ensure that 5 CVs are that of women, let's say, if we are getting. So there is equal opportunity between a man and a woman to get selected. So the input is what has to be impacted so that you get the desired output. Don't focus on the output alone. Very, very real. It is very important because each country in the world, each organization is in a different level of maturity, I would say, right? So not every woman out there is at the same level of empowerment because of the background they come from, because of the mindset, because of their external, whatever, right? Their personal experiences, etc. So organizations do have the reinforcement trainings. Every organization has, and I think it is very, very good for women to grab those, men to grab those, if men want to do that, or any other diverse group of people. Everybody should. An organization has sponsorship program for women, have sponsorship program for women in tech, especially given that that's a big area that everybody is focusing on. Mentorship program for women. Those are real, Smita, and as much as we think those are jargons and just those, flashy things, I think those are real, and if done well, can reap real benefits. For women, I would just say there's a whole world out there for you to grab. You should seize the opportunity, whatever presence, just jump in. Never have this mindset that you cannot do, don't have the self-doubt, just jump in. At the least, you might feel that's okay. You can get up and walk again. I would just say all women should be brave and just go grab opportunities and ask, don't be shy. To organizations, I think you have a big responsibility to make this world an equitable place. And therefore, everybody has to make an effort. If you're not doing it, it's really, you're missing a business opportunity. And therefore, organizations need to lean in to make this a much equitable society. For men, for colleagues, or anybody else in the ecosystem, as I would say, I think we all have the responsibility to each other to see each other succeed. That's how I would put it. As long as we can be happy in seeing everybody else succeed, then this becomes just a natural thing for you to do, is how I put it, Smita. And we all need to be allies for each other.